Welcome to a muzzled chat. Folks, you're in for a treat today. I have two warriors, two heroes, and I'll let you determine for yourself because I'm honored to have them on a muzzled chat today. And I'm so excited to hear their stories, everything that they have done for our country, and now what they're doing on behalf of all the service members, veterans, even us civilians. We owe them more than I could articulate in this moment. They are here to expose so much on the military side of things that we civilians have no freaking clue of. We might have had inclinations and heard some of the tyranny from this source or that source, but what they've done and what they've created and what they're exposing and the things that they are involved in. I mean, folks, they are ripping the freaking lid off of things and hitting truth bomb after truth bomb. I'm so excited. This is incredibly important. This is a must listen to for all Americans. Who are we without our military and armed forces? Where are we going to be if we allow our armed forces to be entirely infiltrated by this ruling class? We have an opportunity here. And I just hope and pray that what they have to share with us here today gets spread far and freaking wide. I know they're selflessly showing up. They're still fighting on the front lines. Can we magnify their efforts and do our part? It's so important in this digital space that we support men like this, that we click on the links that are going to be in this episode below, that we follow what they're doing, that we check it out, that we thumbs up, that we comment and get engaged. That is going to create the very momentum we need that will become the solutions we so desperately need. I'm just really grateful to have John and Scott on this platform today. And with that being said, welcome, fellas. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing good. How you doing, James? Thanks for
I'm
welcome.
doing good, James.
I'm hanging in there. I appreciate it. I'm just trying to gather my thoughts to do you gentlemen justice. And you fellas kicked off an amazing podcast. And I've been browsing it over. I viewed a few of them already. Every single one of them, just my jaw hits the floor. I imagine some of these would even get me downright emotional. But you've been putting in the freaking work. And I could tell it's been a selfless journey, what you guys are doing. And you're nearing already 50 episodes. So I don't want to get ahead of myself. Let's just open mic for a second. Let you guys tell us a bit about yourselves and everything that basically leads up as to why you've kicked off this podcast and what it's about.
You want to go first, Scott, or you want me to go?
No, you go, brother.
All right. I guess I'm in the hot seat first.
You're good, John.
Right, so, yep. It all started back, I guess, in 2004, December. That's when I actually joined the military. So I'll just take you through a kind of a quick tour of what I did. So, I'm an artillery guy. So I'm a 13 Bravo. We shoot artillery rounds. I was at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. I think they changed it to Fort Liberty now, which is kind of ridiculous. I don't know why we're changing names, but they're trying to delete our history, but that's another conversation. Right. So Fort Bragg, North Carolina, I did 12 years there. I actually deployed 2006. Wow. I always say 2006 to 2008 because we got extended for extra. It was a year deployment. We got extended. So it was actually 15 months, but I think I stayed there for like 14 months. So it was 2006 to 2007, close to 2008. But anyway, so I was over there for a while. I took on a few injuries over there, nothing major, nothing you couldn't see from the outside, but I got concussion and some other stuff, but that's another story for another time. So, I spent, like I said, 12 years at Fort Bragg. Fort Bragg, it's home in the 82nd Airborne Division. So that's what we got here, All-American. It's an AA. And so I was a paratrooper. So I used to jump out of aircrafts. And then I became a jump master. And then, I had to move on in my career. So I went over to be a drill sergeant in South Carolina. So, which is a pretty hard school, by the way. You got to do a lot of memorization, and I'm not very good at memorizing things. So it took a lot of work. But I did 3 years as a drill sergeant in South Carolina, and I went over there. When I went over there, I just got promoted to sergeant first class. And then so, like I say, there's from the enlisted side, it goes E1 through E9, and I was at E7. So I was getting close, So that kind of shows you where I was as a sergeant first class. And I did 3 years as a drill sergeant. So I basically taught civilians how to become soldiers, from making your bunk to brushing your teeth to, ruck marching, packing your gear, proper uniform, throwing hand grenades, shooting your M4 carbine, whatever it is, like we train them on. And then so I did that for 3 years. And then COVID had broken out, right? And then I had just moved over to Fort Bliss, Texas. And then, we were doing the whole masking thing and all that other stuff and whatnot. But, it wasn't too big of a deal. And I knew the vaccine was going to come out at some point because they're already talking about making it and getting it approved. But, as you're doing your research, you're like, the vaccine's not going to be approved for years. It takes, 5-6 years for a vaccine and probably longer, to be approved. Right. So I wasn't real too worried about it until, August 2021 came around, and so the vaccine was approved on the 23rd of August, 2021. Right. General Austin put his mandate out on the 24th of August, 2021, basically saying all soldiers have to get the approved vaccine. Right. So it was 1 day later. And then for my specific situation, we were getting ready to do a training exercise in NTC, which is a National Training Center for Irwin, California. So we were leaving in like September, and it was already August. It was the end of August. So from August 31st, right, they said, hey, everybody has to get their vaccine. So that's 7 days after that mandate. So what they did was they had everybody form up on the 31st of August at a motor pool. So we all went to the motor pool, and it was the whole entire brigade, right? Wow. So, I mean, you're talking thousands like that. So I have the documentation. It's called a CONOP. It's a concept of operations, and it has a breakdown of each unit, and it has when you add it all up, there's 1,800 soldiers that needed to get a vaccine on that day, right?
Get out of here. Wow.
1,800 soldiers, no joke. So all these soldiers got there, and each unit got there at a different time. So it was like step time, like this one get here, they do their thing, and this one show up to their thing, right? It was kind of like that. And then, so we all got in formation, we assembled, we got together, and our unit got together, which was 2-3 FA. And then our battalion commander came out. It was Lieutenant Colonel Fox. He came out and read like a policy letter from the brigade commander, Colonel Fairless. And so he's reading it, and it says, hey, you're about to get the approved, COVID-19 vaccine, CURRUPTION. He specifically says that, right? Huh. We know it wasn't there. I got the documentation, Right. And so he specifically says CURRUPTION, and then he stops, because I remember this moment specifically. He stops and he looks around, and he said, what is CURRUPTION? What is that? And then he shakes it off, and then he starts reading again. All right. And then he's going through this whole thing, and he's reading, like, you have to get it or you're going to get UCMJ, which is Uniform Code of Military Justice, which you'll get in trouble. Basically that's the law of the land for the military. And then basically at the end, he's reading off the side effects. The last side effects he says is death. So death is a side effect that he read off on there. And then he says, okay, signed, Colonel Stephen A. Fairless, boom. Right. Like, okay, cool. And then they start handing this DHA, it's a DHA form. I forget what it is, but it's the form. It's a 201, DHA 201, I believe. But it's the form that you have to fill out before you get a vaccine or a shot, and it'll ask you certain questions like, "Hey, are you allergic to this? Have you ever passed out during a shot? Are you pregnant?" Like all these little questions. It's a questionnaire basically, and then it'll tell you, "Hey, it actually said you're about to take a EUA vaccine." And I understand, and I was briefed and all that stuff, right? And then, so instead of taking the time to read it, right, you're in a formation, the military just passes you out the paperwork, and they're like, "Hey, hurry up and fill this out, initial this block, that block, sign that block, and get in formation, go over there." And they're rushing these guys through this, right? But if you read it, it specifically said you're about to take an emergency use authorized vaccine, and that you understand that.
Wow.
Right? And I have all this documentation if you want to see any of it at all.
Wow.
But anyways, so they form up in line, they get to line, and then everybody's in line, and they start to get ready to vaccinate these guys. And, some soldiers are like, "No, I'm not getting it." And then, so they moved on with go see the commander. And then some were like, "Can I see the vial? I want to see the vial. I want to know what you're vaccinating with." And they're like, "No, you can't see the vial." He said, "Yeah, you can't see it. It's the approved vaccine. That's what it is." They wouldn't let them see the vials. So, and then, a couple soldiers, one soldier I know, he got the vaccine. They wouldn't let him see the vial, but he was like, "Okay, I'll just take it." The other soldier, they wouldn't let him see the vaccine, so he didn't get it. Right? He's like, I'm not going to let you do that. And, I don't even know what it is. And think about it, like, you're a soldier, right? Mm-hmm. And that's your whole life. I can't
imagine the freaking pressure, like on an individual level. Wow.
That was that just that day. That was that day. And that was you're just like, I'm either getting my vaccine, I'm being threatened with UCMJ, I'm being threatened to get kicked out of the military, you're taking my life away, you're taking my health insurance away. Some soldiers, every soldier has a different situation. So you got soldiers that got a brand new baby coming in, they just bought a house, they just got this car, they just did, whatever. Just you think of it, it was there, right? And so, and then you're in line thinking about all that stuff, and you get to the front and you got to make a choice. That's it, right? I could pause right there and let Scott start taking off, but if that's okay.
What they did there was wrong on so many levels. All the infringements, legalities. I mean, I view that all as crimes against humanity, and holy smokes.
Yep. Wow. And that's just the beginning of it. But I want Scott to jump in and go, because I could take an hour, 2 hours just talking about all the garbage that I've seen. Right. And so I don't want to take up all that.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride. I mean, for me, I went into the Navy right out of high school in 1993. I had ROTC in high school for 4 years. So when I went in, I was automatically E3 right out of basic training. Chicago, Illinois, I was at Great Lakes, basic training there. And then we had galley duty days or weeks. And then that's what brought me to being a chef. I mean, I'm half Italian and half German, but the good side, the Italian side, from my grandmother always cooked. We always had Sunday dinners and family and stuff like that all the time. So that kind of got me into cooking and bringing families together and stuff. We had really great camaraderie. My father was in Vietnam, so he's a Vietnam War veteran. My grandfather was in the Korean War. So we had military already in our family. And so my father had said to me, "You got 5 choices when you graduate high school." So it was, the 5 branches of service at the time. So I had asked him, I said, what did you do? And he was like, "I was in the Navy." I said, "Well, the fleet?" He was like, "No, I was a Seabee." So he was in Seabee's construction battalion. He's a plumber. He had his own business and everything too. So I decided to go into the Navy. I went into the fleet. And then when I graduated basic training, instead of going to the S2 division, which is the enlisted galleys on the ships, I was on the USS John F. Kennedy CB-67. It was the aircraft carrier. It was out of Philadelphia Naval Shipyard at the time. So instead of going to the enlisted galley, they basically feed like 500 seamen, on the ship and everything. They have an aft galley and a forward galley. So there was 2 of them on there. And then you have a chief's mess, which is a galley. That's what they call the galleys or the dining facilities. And then you have a wardroom mess, which is where all the officers eat. And then you have the island, which is the captain's galley and the admiral's galley. So, and this is on every ship. You know, we were on an aircraft carrier that was the command center for the fleet that we were in the Atlantic fleet. So I got on there, and because I had a recommendation letter from Illinois, I bypassed S2. So I was already, you know, cooking and culinary arts and stuff like that. We had college courses on board the ship. St. Augustine Culinary came on board, so we could do that in Central Texas College. So I was able to, while we were out to sea, I was able to do college courses.
Awesome.
So I did night baker and stuff like that. So I kind of had different parts. You know, sometimes you were in the morning, you do breakfast and lunch, and then you'd be done for the day. And then sometimes you'd come in and do, you know, lunch and dinner. And then there would be a night baker as well. So we kind of covered everything. I did all those duties at one point in my career. And then there was a point where Captain Hoeing had come down. It was at night. I was doing night baking. I was baking cinnamon rolls, and he basically just pulled a cooler up, poured a hot cup of coffee, sat down. He was going to have one of those, and I didn't even know it was him because I spun around and I was just icing in these cinnamon rolls that just came out. I said, "Yeah, go ahead." And I looked up. I was like, "Dang, you know, there's a captain," you know, and it was pretty cool for a young person as myself. I was only like 19 years old at the time, you know, so for me that was pretty cool. But he took a bite of it. He goes, "What do you want to do with your career? You know, where do you see yourself?" And I said, "Well, this is what I like to do. I'm already involved in college courses and stuff like that, as I'd mentioned." And then about 2 weeks later, my senior chief, you know, calls me into his office. He goes, "You're going up top to the island." And I said, what for? And he goes, "You're going to the captain's galley." So I was automatically like just bumped up, and my career, from my standpoint at that, you know, when I was looking at that, I thought that was the pinnacle of my career, because now the captainship, one of the captainship, there's three of us. So they brought me in, as they had a first class petty officer, which is, you know, E6, and then second class petty officer, that's E5. So at that point, Dublin, Ireland, Barcelona, Spain, Portsmouth, England, and New York City, which was Fleet Week. And then I was based in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba for 90, I would say 96, 95, 96, which was Operation Sea Signal. And that was Cuban and Haitian relief refugees, but it was Joint Task Force. So all 5 branches of the military were involved with that. After that, after I got out of the Navy, honorable discharge. From that point, I joined the 6th Area Transportation Unit in Washington County, Washington, PA. So I drove tractor trailers, and I was a chef. And then after that 2-year stint, I went up to the Air National Guard, the 171st out of Pittsburgh, and we did Force Support Squadron. And I also did Search, Fatality, and Rescue, which is called FSERT. And we basically are embedded with FEMA and the Army National Guard. So we'd go out if there's any casualties or anything during a storm, like a hurricane, as an example. They would mark everything, and we would go in. If there was injuries, we'd go in and rescue them. And it dealt with biological, radiological, and chemical weapons, and every weapon you could think of it dealt with. So any catastrophe, basically.
Wow.
From there, after I did 12 years there, honorable discharge as well, and then I went over to 911th Air Force Base, which is adjacent to them, in Force Support Squadron. That was my only thing. It was my last ride until I retired. And then the first 2 years were going good. I was planning on going to NCOA, which is Non-Commissioned Officer Academy, so I can pursue going to E7, which is Master Sergeant. And then the scamdemic hit, and it was bonkers from that point on. But a lot of the things came into question, like I had stated with the National Guard, Air National Guard, with being an FSERT and everything. If it was a real pandemic, then all the tents would have been up. Everyone would have been deployed throughout the country, and we'd be helping American citizens. And at that point in time, we just weren't. So a lot of the red flags would come up. And then a lot of the research that I was doing, the same thing like John was doing from his standpoint, what he was doing. But I was seeing it right before my eyes, where people were already getting vaccinated prior to the letter coming out.
Wow.
And there was already starting to be adverse reactions on my base from people who took it.
Golly.
So from that point on, we were ordered again, just like everybody else was. We were ordered to get the vaccine. I ran into a couple people who were grassroots movement patriots. They were not in the military, just American citizens. And I showed them the order, and they were like, you can sign that under duress without putting your signature on it. So as I'm going through this, and you talked about this beforehand, spiritually, that by God, through certain aspects, whatever they threw at me, I was able to overcome and keep pushing forward. My father had passed away prior to all of this. And just because of my upbringing, he would always say to me, you know, if someone told you to jump off the Brooklyn Bridge, are you going to do it? And I'll be like, no, because you know what I mean? It's stupid, you know?
Right.
So you need me to think for myself. And there was other things that he had taught me, like finish what you start and things like that. And that really resonated with me. So after my commander had told everybody during our stand-up, and they said, you know, this is what you guys are going to be doing. You're going to get the vaccine and everything. Are there any comments, questions, or concerns? And I was like, yes, ma'am, I do. So in the meantime, I had all that paperwork with me, all the research and everything. And I basically had it in my pocket, and I pulled it out. I stood up and I said, I'm calling for a timeout. When a timeout is in the military, certain people have certain things. The Air Force is a little bit different. But I think John can relate to it because he's an NCO as well. So as an example, if someone was changing a tire and the tire fell and hit somebody or whatever, they were injured, you can call for a timeout on a training, and then they do a perimeter, you know, look at and kind of look at the scenario of reason why it happened. You know, they do an investigation and all that good stuff. Well, this is what I was doing. I was calling for a time.
For that, Scott, in the Army, we call a safety stand down, which is the same thing you're talking about. So if an incident happened, we just do a safety stand down, and then everybody would kind of take a pause, and then they'd look into the situation, and then, you know, we'd talk about it and make sure that we don't make the same mistake again, and then we'd move forward and then continue what we're doing.
Wow.
That's your duty. That's your duty as an NCO, to look after your people. So go ahead, James.
Yeah.
I was just curious. So what was the outcome of that timeout?
It never happened. So I called for it. I handed out all that paperwork in front of the whole entire command. Who was there was my lieutenant colonel, the major, the captain, the first shirt. Everybody was standing right there. And there's about 60 of us in that unit at that point in time. So when I stood up, and I kind of peripheral vision wise, I was looking, nobody else had stood up. And I basically called for a timeout. I said, we need to look at both sides of the coin. And from what we're seeing here and what I've been seeing is that there are already adverse reactions. And here's the information. Yeah. So boom, 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 all the way down. They looked at it. They were kind of like eyeballs shoot out of their head and everything, because they were in shock that anybody would even just stand up and challenge it. Right. But there's differences doing it. I mean, I did it in a respectful manner. I didn't just jump up and yell. I raised my hand, did everything the right way. And she had said to me specifically, she said, you have to keep emotion out of it. Well, at that point in time, I was like, how can you keep emotion out of it when people are suffering? Right. On a mental level, and on a physical level. No. So that I just basically kicked that back to her, and it was like this big uproar. So after that, the adrenaline's flowing and everything, and I go outside and I kind of just calmed down. And my wife had sent me a picture of my father. She had no idea. And this is like spiritually that are rocking with me and moving me forward. She had no idea that I was going to stand up or anything. And she was actually moving my mother in with us and helping out. And there was a pack of papers that was there that she went to go move and fell out of her hands. And that picture was embedded in those papers that were supposed to be burned. Wow. And his picture came out, and she screenshot it, sent it to me. It was like as if he was saying to me, you know what you need to do. You know what I mean? And it was just confirmation for me. And from that point on, it was rock and roll time. And they tried to stop at every single level. They would, as an example, they would say, you have 30 days to submit your religious accommodation, which is what I did. So at that point, be like, okay, I'm going to submit my religious accommodation. The next day said, you need it now. It's not 30 days. They changed it. So they did all of these things. It was absolutely crazy. But just to take a quick step back, what happened was that at that point in time, they were moving everybody up to the hangar bay. And you had two lines. You had Pfizer and you had Moderna. Wow. And those were the two options. And then they segregated everybody. So they took them. So you already have the two people in there were logging them in. So they already knew who was getting the vaccines. Then on the opposite side, they had folks that had medical conditions. So they put those folks over there into that, corralled them, so to speak, into that little group. And then all the religious accommodations were on another side of that. So everybody was up at the hangar bay, but they knew who didn't get them. You know what I'm saying? So they were really going after everybody. And then the denial of my religious accommodation, my appeals, I was given an LOR, which is a letter of reprimand, which I refused to sign. So every single document that they pushed forward to me, I refused to sign and spun it back to them and gave them my reasons. I'm standing forward. You know where I stand on this? You never took the opportunity as an NCO to give me the time to present everything, even though I gave it to them, but just have a sit down and say, this is the reason why I'm doing this. So at that point in time, I got forced out into the IRR, which was June of 2022.
Were you able to get many of your comrades to team up with you and follow suit?
No, not at all. It was, everybody had their own decision that they had to make.
Right.
I knew what mine was, and I knew the reasons why I was standing up for what I was doing. Just like John had stated, people that were there at the time, they had families, they had a job, they had a career. So you have all of these things that, again, this is what coercion is.
Yeah. So much manipulation, so much disinformation, and the pressures, but also kind of even the nonchalant. Like, you guys get a lot of shots being in that service role. So I know a lot of guys just are like, whoa, it's another freaking shot, and really hadn't come across the information or had such a powerful role leader in your life to kind of, hey, listen to your intuition,
So from that point on, in the IRR, ready reserve. So I only had 6 left to retire. So instead of finish my career, I was still fighting on the outskirts. I was on podcasts like Wendy Bell Radio Show out of Pittsburgh, and my church, my pastor wrote letters of recommendation for me, or based on my religious affiliation, my religious beliefs, to back up my religious accommodation that I submitted. So when I went to go back in, the NDA had come out, and I was still fighting, like I said. So it was January 2023. I resubmitted my information to get back in so I could finish out. It's because they were starting to allow people back in now. And I was out for 17 months. You know what I mean? So It was crazy. So long story short, I was able to fight and get back in. They wanted me to get a flu shot inoculated in March. I denied that. And I saw that they were mixing COVID with flu. I saw a lot of articles that were coming up that they were starting to mix everything together. And I was like, nope, you're not going to get me on this either.
Wow.
So when I submitted my religious accommodation the second time, which was approved, I was able to submit a vaccine waiver that had all the vaccines on it. And I waived every single one of them because I knew if I just did those two, there'd be something else that they would throw my way. You know what I mean? It's like this big chess game. So I had my pastors read another letter, and then Chris Ann Hall was my constitutional attorney and wrote a letter to me. If I don't heard an officer ever say words like that in front of me anyway, that I could ever remember, especially in this scenario. Yeah. So against everything that they tried to do to stop me, I was actually brought back in September of 2023. They condensed all of my drill days together, and I fought all the way through. And my last drill was the 8th and 9th of January 2024, which was a couple months ago. So even though I've done all that, the whole time I was fighting, meeting these gentlemen here. The Declaration of Military Accountability came out January 1st, 2024 at 4 a.m. in the morning, and they launched that, and it went ballistic with American citizen signatures. I think right now we're up to like 36,000 plus. So if you go to declarationofmilitary.accountability.net, you can go on there and sign the petition, which is pretty cool. And then John and I have been working on everything with other military members, speaking events I've done, and then brought them on to do a Zoom like what we're doing now. And that was probably one of the second to last ones that are on the podcast that you can get to see. So Chaplain James is on there. Derek's on there. A couple people that we know from our 231 chats on there. 231 service members that signed the Declaration of Military Accountability. So it goes way deeper than that. And now it's just taking care and looking after our military brothers and sisters no matter what. It was that way from the get-go because of our oath to the country and under the Constitution. And our oath never weathers away. It's a commitment under God to the country. I know John feels that way. That's how I feel. And everybody that signed that and everybody that's in feels that way as well. And was 8,000 plus, I'll say, military members that are out there fighting like crazy. And like John had said, these people, it wasn't the decision that they could probably take lightly. You know what I mean? Because they were married. You know what I mean? People were active duty, or even if they were reservists, they were still bringing home that extra money. They had insurance, good insurance, and they were going to lose all of that over this. And now that everything has come out, that this is a bioweapon that we've been saying all along, and it's coming out little by little by little. And it's sad to see. It really breaks my heart because we try to stop it. You know what I mean? We tried to do everything that we could to stop it. Man. Other than flipping the heck out and going off on these people. You know what I'm saying? I did
that a couple times.
Oh, wow.
But to see that it actually is, and these people are definitely have a poison inside them that we don't know if there is a cure to it or not. You know what I mean? And this is going to affect them for the rest of their lives. And this is a time released, bioweapon that can happen at any point in time. And we've already seen people falling out and go, and dying.
Right.
Because of it. So this is not something that, you know what I mean? This is not something that we should take lightly. And I just can't lay down, even though I've retired honorably. I've sided with John and everybody else, and we're not laying down either. You know what I mean? So we're here for the fight, and we appreciate your time and giving us this opportunity too. So
my brothers, I have nothing but the utmost respect. You thoroughly, genuinely, more so than so many, are in fact taking your oath serious, fulfilling your oath. And I have nothing but mad respect. I believe your service has only just begun. So as much respect I have for the service and joining, armed forces and all that, you're literally facing combat. You are on the front lines of this information war. And it's no secret as to the corruption we're faced with and how it's trickled down to what you guys were dealing with right there in the armed forces. And to your point, the floodgates have opened, and there's no hiding from the true, like the real evidence, and the crimes against humanity is undeniable at this point. Like right here, breaking news, scientist of the World Economic Forum is now facing the death penalty in India. That proceedings have been initiated. So I can only imagine as time goes on what all is going to take place. But it's important, obviously, that more of us get educated. It boils my blood to see so many Americans trying to go back to their selfish lives. And I came out with a crazy analogy the other day, as though someone broke their leg and you just want to ignore you broke your leg and continue hiking. Mm-hmm. Like you got to stop and address a broken leg, right? And otherwise all these issues or death will ensue. And we just went through this pandemic. Everything's exposed. They tried to murder us and our loved ones and our kids even and our families. And yet you just want to continue hiking? You want to go back to your selfish life at this stage when so many are suffering? No, we must address a broken leg. We must rule out the corruption that enacted all this bio warfare across the freaking globe. We must address that. And we can do that one conversation at a time. And it's like truthfully through these alternate media sources that are now becoming mainstream media, thankfully. So we must get more people onboarding these free speech, non-censored, because that's the dangers. The ones that were chalking it up as, hey, our way or the highway, anything else is conspiratorial. Like, they were wrong.
There's so much censorship going on.
Exactly. So that should help people discern.
I do want to bring
thoughts.
One thing up, because when you were talking, it reminded me of something that I was going to bring up. But so the biggest threat that we were kind of facing with before all this happened, realistically, was the PCR test. Right?
Yes.
Because if you look into the PCR tests, they're not made to do what they're doing. And the inventor, I forget his name, but he died.
He died. There was no pandemic.
There was no pandemic. And they're running these tests at higher cycles than they're supposed to. And the higher cycles you run these tests at, they're going to find what they're looking for. Mm-hmm. And so it's the biggest scam there is out there. There is no pandemic or plandemic without these fake PCR tests that they're using. They're weaponizing them against the public to create pandemics. Right. That's what it is.
John, you just hit the nail on the head right there. And on a recent episode here, we tried just really honing in on that simple fact, because Facebook has become under like pressure and scrutiny due to the colluding, because they're fact checkers on Facebook, in fact, were financed by the pharma companies. Mm-hmm. That's collusion. And 100%. It's no secret that these social media platforms such as Facebook were also colluding with our government. We have communications that have been exposed. And I could only imagine now with Elon Musk and what he has with Twitter and what Ivan Raiklin was talking about, and, really connecting this big spider web of corruption. But you're right. Like, it all falls apart right there. What pandemic? And there's so many different angles to expose all of that, which we're trying to beat ad nauseum to really articulate it in a way that no one at this point would have even the ability anymore, unless they were entirely hacked, which the World Economic Forum says we're hackable creatures, wouldn't be able to deny essentially what really took place here. So with that being said, you guys were able to get out unscathed? Or
I'll finish my story real quick, James, to answer that question.
Okay.
And I'll go back, kind of let Scott jump in. But so when I got to the front of that line, right, on the 31st of August, 2021, right, I refused my vaccine. I had to go see my commander, and then I signed a counseling statement basically saying I refused the lawful order, which we know was unlawful.
Right.
Now, I had to go see a PA and a chaplain immediately after. As soon as I seen both of them individuals, which I only seen the PA. I didn't even bother with the chaplain, because I don't believe these chaplains, have the faith that they say they have. I think it's garbage. Anyways, so I went back to my commander after listening to the PA who didn't know anything about anything. And then I got in my second counseling, right? So from there, that day was over. So we went to NTC. So I went to the National Training Center and I performed at the National Training Center as a platoon sergeant in an artillery battery for that, month or whatever. And then we got back from NTC. Well, actually, sorry, at NTC after the training was over on the 27th of September, 2021, they told us we had to get another vaccine. So the ones that didn't want the vaccine or whatever, so it was either your first or your second vaccine that you had to go get. So we went over there again, this time at NTC. They're doing it outside where the tents were. And I was like, I'm not getting a vaccine. So they're like, okay, go back and see your commander again. So I went back to go talk to my commander. I told my commander, I said, sir, there's no approved vaccine in the United States. Right. And the counseling paperwork that he gave us, they didn't even fix it. It still said template on the paperwork that I signed. And so I was told, like, this is embarrassing. Like it says template. It's not even an accurate counseling. And there's no approved vaccine in the United States anyways.
Right.
I still had to sign. Nope. I still had to sign that paperwork. Right. So I signed that third counseling and then, whatever. So, and then we went back to Fort Bliss, Texas. And then October on the 22nd, they sent us to Stout Gym to get another vaccine. Right. So I went over there and my sergeant major was standing outside, Command Sergeant Major Cedejas. So I went over there, or Sendejas, however you say it. But I went over there, I talked to him. Right. And the other individuals went inside the gym, right, which they turned into a vaccine center. They went in there to go get their vaccine. I stayed out there with Sergeant Major. I told Sergeant Major, I said, there's no approved vaccine in the United States. I said, they're all EUA and they're lying to us. Right. Didn't matter. So my gunnery sergeant came out. He was upset. He's like, he went in there. He told them, he said, hey, I want the approved vaccine. I only want the approved vaccine.
Right.
And they're like, it's all the same. They said, it's all the same. And he's like, I want to talk to somebody in charge. So he talked to somebody else. And he's like, I just want the approved vaccine. So they gave him a bunch of documents and a bunch of papers, which were all outdated. So you're talking about like fact sheets from like a year prior.
Wow.
They were like December 2020 and it was already October 2021. So, all the information was incorrect. They just lied to him. They told him it was approved. It's all EUA. I have all the documents. I have his sworn statement. I have everything. And then we left. And then on the 29th of October 21, we had to go see a PA. So physician assistant. We went over there. A lieutenant met us down there because we had to be escorted. Right. And then so I go in, I talk to this PA and I ask him straight up. I asked him a bunch of questions. So I had wrote down questions. I asked him questions and then I wrote down his answer. And then I took all that information and I put it in a sworn statement when I was done. But one of the questions I asked him, I said, sir, I said, what's the difference between the approved Comirnaty and the emergency use authorized Pfizer? And this guy, he's a PA, and we went to go see him to get educated on this approved vaccine. And he says, I don't know what Comirnaty is. So that's the first question I asked this guy.
Wow.
And I'm like, I'm talking to you about this and you can't even answer that question. Yeah. So I'm like, whatever, man. So he gave us the paperwork to sign, basically, because we were supposed to request an exemption through him, I guess. So it was a medical exemption or religious exemption. So I just signed both of them. I was like, I'll just put a medical exemption in and a religious exemption, whatever, right? Well, so we talked about my medical history a little bit. And then he's like, okay. And on the paperwork, it says he's going to take 72 hours to, make a determination on my medical exemption, right? So this dude right there in front of me, without wasting any time at all, he checks no exemption, right? And I'm like, okay, so you don't even want to waste, the 72 hours you're supposed to do your job, right? So we're like now arguing because I'm yelling at this guy, right?
Right.
So anyway,
wow.
So I'm like, whatever, dude. So I'm like, I'm leaving. So I left, and then they gave me the paperwork, and I know the PL went in to go talk to the PA. The platoon leader went in to talk to the PA because things weren't seeming right. So, and what the platoon leader said was basically the PA had no idea what's going on, and it's just a check the box scenario, right? So you just get it over with. I'm like, whatever. So I have that in sworn statement as well. But I go to leave I looked down at my form I just filled out and they gave back to me, and he changed the entire form, right? And it wasn't a big form. It was just where I circled the religious and medical exemption. He had gave me a brand new form that only had medical exemption circled, and then he had said nothing. So I had to go back, start yelling at people again. I'm an ex-drill sergeant, so I'm like losing my mind, right? I'm in there in the medical facility yelling at people, and I'm like, you're going to give me this paperwork that I filled out, and I'm going to get it right now, right? And then so, I got into it with the lady at the front desk. I started yelling at the PA when he came out. And he's like, "Oh, you're just upset at something else and taking out on me." I said, "No, I'm not. I'm taking out on you what you freaking did. You just did." So I got my original paperwork back.
Wow.
I left. I go back to the battery, which there's companies, batteries, and troops. I'm going to battery some artillery. And I go back and I start yelling at my commander. And I'm like, "Look, sir," I said, "this PA doesn't know, F and this and that and blah, blah, blah. And he doesn't even know what commonality is. And you sent me over there for this and that. And he did this." Right. And I'm just yelling at my commander. And then my commander actually, like, we're in a conference room, right, at the battery with all the other soldiers that were unvaccinated in the conference room. I'm yelling at my commander. Right. Well, he stops, looks at me, and he says, "Sergeant Alarm, I need you to go into the hallway and calm down." All right. So I'm like, whatever, dude. So I go in the hallway. Right. And I'm just standing there like, I don't know, I'm blacking out, whatever. I'm upset. I'm frustrated. I finally calmed down. I go back in, and then, at some point they cut us loose. So I'm like, whatever, man, it doesn't even matter. You guys are retarded. So all that happened, right? And we're on, that's 29 October 2021. And then, that's all the paperwork that basically needed to get done. As soon as that happened, they pulled me off my platoon sergeant position. So I was in charge of roughly 35 to 40 soldiers. They took me away from my position, right? And they sent me up in the S2 shop. I had two soldiers, one NCO and like one specialist or PFC or whatever. Right. They took me off my position. I had no more responsibility with those guys. They basically hid me up there around nobody. And then they gave me a GOMAR, General Officer's Memorandum of Reprimand, right? Which basically I'm not going to be getting promoted anytime soon. Right. And they flagged me. So I'm unable to get promoted again. My promotion list is actually coming out pretty soon, and I was hoping to make Master Sergeant, right? Yeah. So that all got nixed, right? And then so I got my GOMAR. I did a GOMAR rebuttal, right? Which I basically sent a rebuttal up to them saying, "Hey, you're violating these rules, regulations, and everything, and you pulled me off being a platoon sergeant." And the rebuttal went to the brigade commander. So I told him straight up, "You illegally vaccinated 1,800 soldiers." That's what I told him. That's what you did, right? Yeah. And then it didn't matter. I still got my GOMAR. So I set up an Article 138, and that is protected communications that goes to the commanding general of that post. So I did the same thing, right? I said, on August 31st, you guys illegally vaccinated 1,800 soldiers. And I had all the information, all the data, all the paperwork in that. And I the first thing you do with the Article 138 is you send a initial request for redress. So I sent that request for redress to my brigade commander. He ignored it. So I waited the appropriate time, which I think is 15 days. And then I was like, all right, well, you ignored it, which means you don't agree with it. So then I sent that Article 138 to the commanding general of that post, which has to go through the same channel. So it has to go through every officer within your chain of command. So by the time it got to the brigade commander, it magically got lost.
Wow.
Right. So I had to go to the IG and tell the IG, "Hey, I need you guys to help me find my Article 138 so it can get sent up properly." Right. So, and then when I was with the IG, I explained to him, I said, "I want to make an IG complaint because the vaccine's EUA. It's not even approved." And then I broke that down for them, and they're like, "Sir, you can't make a complaint because you never got vaccinated, so nothing happened to you. And since you are making a Article 138, your complaint is being looked at." So I couldn't do anything with IG. I sent all the information to the CID, which is the Criminal Investigation Division, through their P3 website. I sent all the information. Boom. Nothing. To this day, nothing.
Wow.
So CID doesn't care, IG doesn't care, and the chain of command loses your paperwork purposely. So they got a hold of the SJA. The IG got a hold of the SJA, and they kind of they located my paperwork basically with the brigade level legal. But it turned out the guy was like, "Hey, your paperwork is good." Like, he was surprised that it was good. Like, he's like, "Send me all your stuff you got." I'm like, "Okay." I sent it to him. And he's like, "Oh," he's like, "Wow, your Article 138 is good. All the paperwork's good. Usually people do the initial part and don't do the second part because they don't know how to do it." I'm like, "Okay." And then, so since he found out it was good, he was like, "I can't take this." He's like, you have to. He had the IG call me, and the IG was like, "Hey, I need you to send me all your stuff so I could send it to the legal, because it can't go directly to legal." So see, he thought my paperwork was bad, so he was just going to nick it out there, but he couldn't do it.
Mm.
So now they wanted me to send it the other way around. And I told him, I said, "Why don't you find where my paperwork initially went when I sent it up so we could properly send it up to the commanding general? Because it sounds like you're trying to hide my paperwork and cover it up."
Right.
And then he's like, "We're not trying to do that. Just send it to me." And I'm like, "I'm not sending you anything. Go find my original documentation." And then he said, "Okay, well, you're not going to send it to me. I'm going to close it out." Well, that's what they were going to do anyways. If I would have gave it to him, that SJA legal individual was going to close that paperwork out anyways. And he said, "Your criteria doesn't fit an Article 38. If you read the criteria for an Article 138, it fits there's like 4 of them. But one, I'll just off the top of my head, is violating the law." That's one of them. And he said it doesn't fit any of them. And I'm like, "You're crazy, man." So they nixed that. And then I got kicked out of the military in November of 22. Right?
Kicked out because you wouldn't take this bioweapon job. And how many years did you put?
I put in 17 years, 10 months of service. I lost my retirement. I lost my medical insurance, and they just kicked me out. Ridiculous.
That makes me freaking sick. My mind is blown. This is nothing shy of criminal. It is absolutely criminal what has taken place here. What has taken place regarding you. What has taken place with Scott. I'm sure with so many of these warriors that you've had on your podcast, it is absolutely criminal what took place with the 1,000 soldiers you talked about getting pressured and manipulated and coerced into getting that jab into their arm. And the thousands of our young men that signed up, swearing oaths, willing to die on behalf of all of us and our nation, our country, and to be a free people. And this is how they get treated? Unbelievable. We, the people, must assemble. The outcome on this is unacceptable, and we could be the remedies and the solutions. Let's please do just that.
And like I said, it was involuntary all the way. Even signing the documentation for separation is illegal because the whole process is illegal.
Yeah.
It's so ridiculous.
Well, this infringes. This is no secret. This infringes on pretty much every line item from the Nuremberg Code, even.
Oh yeah.
Wow. And civilians think they have it bad. I get it. Yeah, pressured, and you got your job, right, and your family and things like that too. But I mean, weren't some service members potentially faced with like court-martialing and felony charges, even potentially?
Well, that's one thing that did happen. We all got threatened with the same stuff.
Yep. Yes.
But there's only one soldier that I know that actually went to court-martial, and that's Lieutenant Mark Bashaw.
Wow.
And after he basically went to court-martial, they kind of nixed everybody else's because they weren't going to win those.
Yep.
I imagine there would be pardons and oh my gosh.
Yeah, we brought up.
Go ahead, Scott.
The thing is too is that kind of like what John was talking about. For me, I submitted 2 IG complaints. Well, they moved the major that was taking care of my first IG complaint and the second one, and they put her in a different department once they knew I was submitting everything. I even submitted an EEOC, never heard a thing, not one thing, until I went to the congressional, and that's how I was fighting my way back in. But John's right. They swept everything under the rug. They kept everything hush hush. You know what I mean? So they're just as complicit as everybody else was, right, from the vaccine all the way down the chain of command, because you had people who were doing their duty as an NCO per their oath and everything else to protect their military brothers and sisters. And these clowns are sweeping all the evidence under the rug and not even doing their jobs.
Right.
That's basically what it came down to. And that's everybody that stood up. That's the same thing that happened. It could have been, doesn't matter if it was Coast Guard, any of the branches, it was the same scenario. And these people were like, if you look in like the one podcast, we had a 5-panel. It was the first time we did that. Navy and Coast Guard guys, they were put in different like birthing areas and separated completely from the rest of the other people. It's like they're like POWs almost. You know what I mean? It's wild. Right. And if you go to the other ones, you can see the vaccine injuries and stuff like that. This is what we're doing. This is the reason why we're standing up. And this is why we've done certain speaking events and stuff like that. Like on my end of it, I had 2 different ones. One was for Washington County Patriots, which is in Washington County, Pennsylvania. I did one of those back in January 2024. We recently did Right to Liberty, which I had John on there and the other gentlemen that were in there too, which was the one podcast that we did as well, to bring them on to tell their stories as well. So it wasn't just one person and saying, oh, he's a disgruntled employee. Oh, really? Well, right. Listen to all of these stories that are here. And this is what we're doing. We're getting the information out to the American public who has no clue what's going on. They're going about their daily lives.
Yes.
Not a thought in the world of what has happened to the military. And how do you take down a country? You take out the military.
Right. Exactly.
And the civilian public, right? Mm-hmm. They don't even understand that they got an emergency use authorized vaccine. They don't understand the difference. They don't understand the U.S. codes behind it. They're different. They don't understand that they were still test dummies even after the fact that Pfizer said, hey, it's approved. Okay, you said it's approved, but we're not getting the approved vaccine. And everybody in the United States is a test dummy.
Under the guise of an FDA, there was no FDA approved.
There was no
jab that went in a single arm. That's where I got to applaud everything you guys are doing. As I'm scrolling through your podcast and all your episodes and military service members, COVID corruption panels. So you're essentially bringing all of these situations, all of these soldiers, veterans on to expose what they've went through, and just this tyrannical, oh my gosh, it's so important. Like, this is a part we really need out in the public eye to expose how bad this pandemic actually was. You guys had it real freaking bad. I can't even imagine.
It was almost like boot camp on steroids for us, because they tried everything they could to break you. And in basic training, it's the same thing. I mean, Bud's training, if you seen movies with Navy SEALs or whatever, who's going to ring that bell? You know what I mean? Who's going to ring that bell and quit? You know what I mean? And then you've got people that are from officers as well into enlisted, and you go from E1 all the way up to the top. They went through that same almost crash course training. Are you going to break? You know what I mean? Are you going to bend on your oath? And those people didn't. And
when you didn't, you were made an example of.
Yep.
And that's what they did.
Yep.
And then, what was I going to say? Oh, and that's why the Declaration for Military Accountability is so important, because what that document does is, one, if you read through it, it tells the American people kind of what happened. And then if you sign it, it's saying that you're agreeing with what's written on there. And that's a big push to hold these individuals accountable within the military. You're talking about these high-ranking individuals. I mean, I want to hold my first sergeant accountable because he's a dirtbag. And then, the commander was a dirtbag. And then every person above those individuals, I mean, my problem is I sat there and I showed you the paperwork, in black and white per the law, and you threw me in the trash.
Right.
You know what I mean? And we all got slapped in the face and stabbed in the back. But that document is going to hold those individuals accountable. And once we clean the military out, we can take back this country.
It's so crazy. How did they, it just from the chain of command, you just do it. You just do
in the
what
military.
You're told.
Yeah. In the military, when you get a mission that comes down from the top, you know what I mean? In your mind,
you have to do it.
You're already thinking it's a lawful order because that's how stuff comes down lawfully.
Right.
And it's just another mission. Go do this, go do that, go do that. And you do your best to get that done. And most of these individuals, these officers and enlisted side, they're so worried about their careers and trying to look better than everybody else and get that next promotion. Like that's all they care about.
Yeah.
I never worried about my promotion. I got a mission. I went and did it. I don't care when my NCOER is due, my evaluation report is due. I don't care when my next promotion is. None of that stuff bothered me. People would have to call me and say, hey, you got promoted. I'm like, oh, I did? Cool. But they're so worried about it. They want to outdo their peers. And that's what it turned into. Right. It turned into, I'm going to get my whole company vaccinated so I can outdo my peers and get on that promotion list.
See, that is
basically,
insane.
and then the people that were up on the higher ups and everything were getting their palms greased by big pharma.
Right.
You know what I mean? Getting paid and everything. So it's just like,
I'm sure there was incentive. Yeah.
They wanted that star, that another star, that next position. And what do I do to get that? I get blackmailed. You know what I mean? And you got honey pots and you got big pharma pots. You know what I mean? And everything else is all connected. And these people are treasonous cowards, man. And how do you deal with treason?
See, that's what it.
Look at the Constitution.
Yes, that's kind of what it's boiling down to, because recent reports are showing over 35 million deaths attributed to this bioweapon jab. And it isn't in adverse effects. It was intended consequences. And you could look into the patents, and it is harder to prove intent. But you look at how this predates, a lot of these things predate before this even COVID was even a thing. It just makes sense. I mean, even the simple fact you got Bill Gates TED Talk 2007 talking about depopulating and how they can, if they do a really good job through human healthcare and vaccinations, they can achieve this lose basically genociding 10 or 15% of the population. So in my eyes, you tell me, like, to the listeners, anybody, how is this different than any of your commanders telling you to aim at an American citizen? Aim that rifle at American citizen. What's the difference? It's unlawful, right? 100%. It goes against your oath. And you guys get doxxed for it. You get booted. You lose your pensions. You lose your retirement. You lose all those years that you were your whole future.
Well, see, now the problem is we're still serving. We're just not getting paid for it.
Right. That's where, oh my gosh, listeners, please, can you check the links below? We're going to add their podcast, The Forgotten Soldiers, and blast this as far and wide as you can. Any service members, veterans, active, get this out to them. And we really need the civilian population to grasp this more. And undoubtedly, through the multitude of episodes you continually come out with, you're going to do just that.
The fact of the matter is that even John and I had talked, it's not about money. It's not about anything else except for accountability for us and taking care and looking after our military brothers and sisters and getting the information out there. That's what this is about. That's what it's always been about since we stood up. So,
yep. Because, the every shot that these individuals take, you're playing Russian roulette.
100%.
We don't even know if it's just it's probably not even just the COVID shot. It's every damn thing that they're giving everybody. Because as well as I do, that the government is not, with all that money that they spent and everything, they're not going to just dump that stuff down the toilet. They're going to, and just like they did with the flu, if they showed you right then and there that they're mixing it with the flu, well, what else are they doing? You know what I mean? What else are they putting in? Are they putting in Hep A, Hep B, Hep C? You know what I mean? And anything else they inject the military with. So I don't trust any of them pieces of garbage as far as I could.
Yeah, we need to clean things up. It's just like a recent episode David was saying, like, we the people are the government. Like, we legitimately are the body of this country. That's why they're trying to infiltrate from so many different levels, from an invasion and everything, and dilute the patriotic backbone and historical, values to this nation. We must, like, God calls us to pick up the sword and fight. And how we do that in an information age is by sourcing information, sharing information. And our founding fathers knew some very profound truths and concepts. And that's why our First Amendment, number one, Second Amendment, number two, and essentially I view the Second Amendment is just when our first one fails bad enough, it's to back it up, right? And they've tried really hard. They've infringed insanely on our First Amendment. We can't allow that shenanigans. So, listeners, please send this out as far and wide as you can. We must support what you guys are doing. I hope and pray that you become entirely effective this selfless journey you are on. You've compiled quite a few stories now. Do you want to share any of the most shocking?
Oh man, every time you hear a story, it gets worse and worse and worse. And then
does.
They're just everything that's near, like they did that. Oh my God. And like Scott was saying, on them ships, they're putting people in the berthing unit and they weren't allowing them to come back to dock. If that one individual wasn't vaccinated, we're not docking. It's like, you know how much pressure's on that guy?
That's insane.
They punished everybody.
If you're out on
it's
a
like
ship,
boot camp, like I said.
Yeah.
No, it's like boot camp. But one guy screws up, everybody goes down. You know what I mean? It's the same thing. That's what I'm saying. They punished these people and they held them, made them look like they were the reason why they didn't get to go on Liberty or whatever. That's mental bullying. What they did.
That's psychological warfare on its own soldiers.
Yep. Yeah, it was 100% operation that was pushed onto the American people and the soldiers within the states. But like I was trying to say, if it looked that one soldier, like if you're on a ship and you're deployed for a year or 6 months or whatever they deploy for on ships, and then they say you can't dock because that guy needs to get vaccinated, it's ridiculous. But I'll bring up another story because I always talk about Chaplain James because his story is so horrifying, right? But anyways, he was deployed in Afghanistan and, the vaccine was approved and they told everybody they need to get it. They didn't even have the Pfizer vaccine there, not even the EUA. They only had I think it was the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. And they told those guys that it was approved, right? And then the chaplain didn't want to get it. He was already sick. He had already recovered from it. He still didn't want to get it. And then they told him, you're going to get court-martialed if you don't get the vaccine. And they also told him, and I don't want to mess the story up, so, the chaplain's more than willing to come tell you all about it. But they basically told him, no, you got to get it, right? And so, he said he prayed about it, because they're threatened. They even told him he wasn't going to go back home to the States if he didn't get his vaccine.
What?
So he was scared and he went and got it. So he got his vaccine, and I don't remember the time frame exactly when he got it and when he had his first heart attack or heart issue. Right? It wasn't very long. I don't know if it was like a few days or whatever it was, but he ended up having some sort of heart issue, right? And then he had to get an emergency pacemaker put in.
Wow.
Right? And so, and he'll tell you straight up, he's like, he said they were saying soldiers were committing suicide. He'll tell you straight up that there was a couple suicides, but most of those soldiers died in their bunks after the vaccine. And he'll tell you that some soldiers committed suicide because of what the vaccine did to them. He'll tell you straight up.
Yep.
And so he goes back to Fort Bragg, and he thought he was going to get some help, but instead they started a 15-6 investigation on him, right? Because he was saying, "Oh, I'm vaccine injured," and they're like, "No, you're not. You're not. The vaccine didn't do this to you." They were trying to tell him he had heart issues before he joined the military, which is impossible because you go to MEPS, right? And they check your heart and they run all the tests on you. And if you're good, then they push you forward. If you got heart issues, you're not going to be able to join the military. It's just the way it is. So they told him he had heart issues prior. And then they tried to, I can't really say the rest of the story, but, I can get him in touch with you if you want, and he'll be more than happy to share his story. So that way he can help, because he's all about helping people and getting people to understand what's going on. So, ultimately we're trying to save people's lives here. And he doesn't want anybody to end up in the situation that he's in. It's just so ridiculous. But yeah, that's Chaplain James.
Yeah, that is so upsetting. That boils my blood is literally an understatement. Yeah, Chaplain James, I would love to have him on the platform. And that's amazing to hear. What a hero. That even amongst his challenges, suffering, the intentional effects of this biological weapon, he still wants to show up on behalf of his fellow comrades, on behalf of the citizens of the nation he was willing to die for, in a selfless way to help them. I would be honored. Wow. I was actually just trying to find that other soldier whistleblower that actually has access, because he's on the health side of the service, and he was going over all the stats on myocarditis and neurological issues and miscarriages. I mean, the percentages increasing in the thousands. And there's been other whistleblowers even now talking how armed forces have been manipulating documents and numbers, trying to even go back in time and pre-pandemic and make it look like a natural curve and things. It's sick. Like, we got to open.
They don't want to get caught. The problem is that they already have been caught. That's the fact of the matter. But they're trying to, go back and sweep away the tracks, so to speak. But the problem, like I said, they could do all they want to try to, mask it and cover it up. But you got, guys like John and others and myself and everything. And, I've got all of this documentation. John's got probably about the same amount, that we've saved. And,
wow.
We're not giving up and we're not laying down for what they did. And I want to, we talked about plugs and stuff like that in the beginning about, different things, about talking about different, like you had the 20-year t-shirt on about the 22 and everything like that.
Yes.
Well, I want to give a book plug to Commander Robert A. Green Jr., who's still serving in the United States Navy. He came out with Defending the Constitution Behind Enemy Lines. So on mine, he signed it and everything, but on the inside of mine, it also has signatures of all my airmen who I stood up for.
Wow.
And who signed it. And it goes cover to cover, every blank page on here. So when my lieutenant colonel said, "Oh, keep emotion out of it," well, you tell that to these people here who signed this book and their feelings on what had happened. You tell them that, and you tell it to their families too.
And what's that book about, Scott?
This book is about the story of the silent majority who put their constitutional oaths before all else to keep our founding fathers' great gift of liberty alive. That's what that's about. Wow. And you'll see different stories in there. And it's definitely very powerful.
That's about basically what we all went through. That's what that's about.
Wow. Be sure to send me the link to that and all the things, your social medias. Obviously, we'll include the podcast listeners. Be sure to check the comment section of this episode and give them a follow. Order up this book. We got to up the awareness so we could properly acknowledge the full entire picture, like the full scope as to what really took place, how bad this actually was. In my eyes, I mean, there's so many different avenues anyone could so choose to go down that is going to expose essentially this evil ruling class. What it basically boils down to is individual choice. Like, do you want to choose to be ignorant? Do you want to choose to be cowardice and run? Or do you want to choose to seek truth, seize this moment in time, your life, and the impact you could have for good on behalf of others? I mean, that's, in my eyes, the only option. If you're in a gray area and you're just, I really need this truck, I'm going to focus on this truck, or I'm already too busy with my family and I can't even imagine on board, then I want you to acknowledge something. You yourself have been diminished mentally, physically, on a health level that you're not operating intentionally being done at 100%, because no man, especially in their right mind, couldn't step forward and minimally support all the hard work you gentlemen are putting out there, because you're already doing the work. All you need is the support. Genuinely, that's all you need. You're bringing in the awareness, and it's through platforms like this, like yours. We could do the calls to action. Like, you're doing big things. You have an affidavit, a legal document that you guys are building out. To tell us about that.
Yeah. Well, before we get into that, I want to mention one thing before I forget, and it really boils my blood. So I did a little podcast, and it was on the fall vaccines, because they had the new ones coming out for fall. And I think it was the 23 that was coming up, right? And we already passed all that. But, I was on the CDC website and I'm looking through the IIS, the information, the immunization system, and I'm reading through the fall vaccines. All right. This is what upsets me. Now, whether the approved vaccine was here at that time, I don't know. I doubt it. Right. But when you read them, I think it was 10 years and below. So if you're age 10 down to nothing, I guess, every vaccine in fall was still EUA. And so if you got your kids vaccinated, they're all test dummies. Dummies. Every one of your kids, right? There was no approved vaccine in the United States. I have the document, and I took a screenshot of it on my desktop, and the date was January 13th, 2022, and it says there is no approved vaccine in the United States. So I can guarantee anybody that got a vaccine before that date, it's not approved. And then even when fall came around in 23, and if you got your child a vaccine, not let alone you, if you're over that age, you're still gambling. I don't know if it was approved or not. I wouldn't know. I didn't check. But your child got an EUA, and you're gambling with your child's life now. And that's what these evil people are doing.
Yeah. No jobs. It's crazy, because it's not like just out the gate due to this one singular bioweapon COVID jab. Like, I became a vaccine denier and just ruled them all off initially entirely. What it did do was open my eyes to corruption, and now doing research and literally, like, what a gift, what a blessing what exposure to the opportunities we freaking have as citizens and holding ourselves accountable and responsible as parents. Obviously, it goes without saying, you signed up, you got a lot of responsibility. But what was wild pre this pandemic, what parent actually even looked into what was in any of those 80 jabs your child are given now just to go to public school? The reality of it is the majority of parents didn't know a single freaking ingredient of a single one of those 80 different shots. Well, now a lot of parents are looking into that. We've looked into it. And the fact is, there is poisonous, toxic things in every single one of them. And the data's out that children without any shots, including any of the childhood vaccine schedule, are healthier without them than ones that have any of them. So it's really been exposing as to how, for a very long time, we all haven't even necessarily even been free in our own minds, in our own world, in our own societies, and we've been blindly entrusting just the whole infrastructure. And so it's healthy to question things and help us get to the bottom of things. But ultimately, until we rule out this corruption, it's a crazy tough task, because they're constantly be lighting wildfires. They're constantly going to ramp up fear porn. They're going to do all these things, and it will be hard to get to the bottom of truths till we rule out that corruption. And then from there, everything is just going to be downhill. It's going to be easy because we, the people, can ensure that better tomorrow for all. But it's got to start somewhere. And you guys have kicked it off and exposing things in a huge way where I just, wow, as soon as I came across your podcast, I was like, we got to co-promote. We got to do what we can. As it's been mentioned before, just that rising tide, kind of just rising all ships.
You make a good point too about the about what ingredients, so the thing that we definitely want to look at and bring to a point, and for parents to ask themselves the same question: what ingredients are in these? Okay. Right. And then what adverse reactions come from those ingredients? And is this something that you want to put into your children or yourself? And if the answer is no, well, then you say no, and that's it. It's no, and you don't bend, you don't fold, it's but, no buts, no nothing. We're not doing any of this.
Right.
And taking a stand for your family.
I like that. And not being afraid to speak out on your findings. Doesn't matter if people, it just goes to show where people are getting their information. If they want to call you conspiratorial or something, it's just like, really, you're still tuning into the talking heads at this point. You're listening to the war machine and known as mainstream media that's dying off, that in fact is no longer mainstream. Why are you listening to what's dying off, the sources that lie and deceive, that aren't a free and open press, that in fact the majority of their funding comes from these pharmacies and like BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street, essentially the ruling class? You don't know what they don't want you to know. You don't know what you don't know. So eat some humble pie. It will do you some good. It very well could save you and your child's life.
Yep. And like Scott said, if you're sitting there and you're saying, no, I'm not going to do it, and then you get coerced into it, right? Don't fold. When you make your mind up as a man or a woman, right? You make your mind up, and that's it. I'm not doing this, period. You're going to have to come over here and hold a gun to my head and probably pull a trigger, because I'm not doing it. Right. That's the way it is. And when you choose the right side, because you're doing it for a reason, right? Because evil is literally doing this to you, whether you see it or not. Evil is doing it. And when you choose the right side, guess who has your back? God has your back. And I'm going to tell you one quick story, right? And it's going to be super quick, right? All right. For me, right, the first time that they force vaccinated or coerced to vaccinate 1,800 soldiers was on August 31st, okay, of 2021. And I told the whole story. But what you didn't know is that first time was on my birthday, August 31st. I was born in 1984. And I knew on that day, God's talking to me saying, hey, it's your birthday. Are you going to take this vaccine or not? And I'll tell you what, my birthday present wasn't getting a damn shot up my arm, right?
That's awesome.
It was God saying, hey, wake up.
Wow. I love that you just brought that into the discussion, because that right there, my friends, will, in fact, solely help guide us and give us the discernment to basically decipher what's truthful and good and what's not, and misleading and deceiving and bad, because this is a spiritual war and we live in a wartime. And this is what drives me nuts. Like, I may not have joined the Marine Corps, but I very much feel as though I'm on the front lines right now. We all, in a way, are. This is just different warfare than what we're traditionally used to acknowledging or seeing, where more often it's on a distant battlefield, soldiers are being sent out. The war is taking place right here in our homes, in our backyards, like in our society, and it's impacting our women and our children. And it blows my mind as to how so many men aren't answering this call or willing to acknowledge it, because in a wartime, at war, like, there's no option. I mean, unless you're willing to accept the outcome by not doing anything.
Yeah, this could be over right now. Right now, it could be over. If everybody just said no,
right?
Guess what? We're done.
Yeah.
But that's not reality. I wish it was, but it's just not. I don't know how much we can actually discuss on this affidavit, but what I will say is, I'm taking all the documentation that I had while I was in, basically from the time of the mandate all the way, to when I got kicked out, and a little bit past that, because some of those things affected my life after I lost my insurance. I still tried to send some communications up to CID. I still tried to do some things. I sent some information to Senator Johnson. There's a lot of stuff that we tried to do, that none of it worked. Like it, and I'm not busting Senator Johnson. I'm just saying there's I made a video on it, and I'll just tell you, I know I'm getting off track a little bit, but there's a congressional research survey from September of 2021. And the whole survey was about after the approved vaccine, the difference between the approved and not approved. And in that research survey, the congressional research survey, it states in there that all the vaccines that were EUA should have got thrown in the trash because it was approved, but they didn't want to do that. So they extended the emergency use vaccine. And it basically says that that's why all those vaccines were still here, and they never brought any of the approved in the United States. So the entirety of the Congress knows about this since September 2021. So when they're not doing anything and we send them more information, and then I come across that, I understand why, because they don't care. That's exactly why, because they don't care. But I will say that's going in my affidavit as well at some point. But what I will say is that affidavit of truth is going to be notarized. It's going to be a legal document. And everything I went through from that point till whenever I close it out will be under the penalty of perjury. So when I say all these individuals committed a crime, right, at some point, they're going to have to be held for that crime, held responsible for that crime. Or they could show the evidence under penal of perjury that I'm lying, and then I can go to jail. But I guarantee I'm not lying because I have all the evidence. Right. I have everything that for my situation anyways, I have it all. Wow. You know, and Scott has it all for him. And we know individuals that have it all on their side.
John, Scott, what you guys are doing on behalf of everyone alive and well today, especially our service members and our veterans and those that face this level of tyranny, I applaud you. And I just hope and pray you get the proper support it takes to have that impact you're so desiring to have, that we so desperately need to have. And it goes beyond the scope of just accountability. Yes, as much as we want to see that, we want to see, I mean, it would be a different scenario if people weren't egregiously murdered and suffering, right? But, you know, at this point, we want to see proper compensation for those suffering. We want to see that this never takes place again, that our military units aren't freaking weakened by this cleansing. It's crazy.
Since you brought that up too, you know, it's nothing new. The only problem is their hand was overplayed because, right, you know, they added everybody in the United States plus the world, if you want to go that far. Right. But they did this with anthrax with the military, right? Because there's and I didn't even mention the U.S. codes, but U.S. Code 1107, that's what they covered during anthrax, right? So they actually violated U.S. Code 1107 during anthrax. So that went to court and this and that, blah, blah, blah. Well, then they passed the law, another U.S. code. It's called 1107 Alpha. And that Alpha, see that 11 U.S. Code 1107 covers INDs, right? And IND is like investigational new drug, okay? And that covered anthrax. After they went to court and all that stuff happened, they came out with 1107 Alpha, which covers EUAs, emergency use authorized vaccines or whatever. It doesn't have to be a vaccine, but it's EUAs, right? So the military actually violated that law, that U.S. code, because in that, if you read that code, it says only the president of the United States can basically tell a member of the military to take an EUA, but he has to do that in writing, and there has to be certain criteria for him to meet that. Well, that criteria wasn't met, and he never put that in writing. Wow. Right? What happened was the Secretary of Defense, all right, General Lloyd Austin the third, I think. What a weirdo. But he made that that memorandum, right? And it said that you have to take the approved vaccine. Wow. Because he knows he can't force anybody to take an EUA. So he wrote that in the memorandum. So tell me that Pfizer on the 23rd approved this vaccine. On the 24th, somebody already had the memorandum ready to go, right? Yeah. And then when they got all that pushback, right, they came out with the Terry Adirham, right? It's like the health secretary or whatever. She came out with the next memorandum on the 14th of September 21, which basically said that it's okay to take the emergency use vaccine as if it was the approved because they're interchangeable. So that's you should just do it like it's the approved one, which legally, like, that person should be in jail right now. Right. Yeah. It is
more entrapment. That's what it is.
Yeah. Things are so upside down. This is such a circus. But guys, I could have you on. I'd love to have you on multiple times. Whatever we could do on this platform to help promote and get the message out. So let's stay in touch, because as you find paths to take and calls to action or have news to share, let's be in touch. Let's continue to up the awareness to the best of our ability, especially on I feel a civilian level. it's just crucial that we get informed on this so we can seek the remedy. I mean, any other burning desires or things you want to bring up before we wrap up?
Yeah, you got anything?
I'm good. I mean, we really talked about a lot of things and covered a lot of stuff. I mean, a lot of the information is really coming out on X in droves. I mean, if you're not paying attention to that, you're really not going to know what's going on because you're not going to get it from the media because they're not going to tell you because they're complicit in it also, just like we talked about. So if you're not seeing the information out there or hearing it from your platform, James, or, the Forgotten Soldiers platform or X in general, I mean, everything's coming out. So stay informed on it and keep putting out that information and wake people up, because once we all stand up, it's game over.
Exactly.
We're just waiting on everybody else to come on board.
I like it. Very well said. Well, with that, gentlemen, I'm so grateful for you taking the time and joining us here on a Muzzle Chat today. Just a FYI to the listeners, I do apologize. We had some connection issues regarding with Scott today. I hope it didn't take too much out on what he was actually saying, because at the point it was that muffled and we can't make out anything. I'll more than likely edit it out so it's not painful. But I hope, just as a disclaimer for you, Scott, and the listeners, that it makes sense and it doesn't take out too much of the meat and potatoes. I just wanted to let folks know that we had some connection issues today, but it mainly only was with you for a while, Scott. So I'm sure we still got awesome content.
Real quick.
Yes.
I just want Scott. Tell me all the famous people you cook for, Scott.
Secretary of the Navy. It was captain of the ship. I mean, I don't know about famous, but Carolyn Kennedy, which is John F. Kennedy's daughter.
Wow.
I just met a lot of different high-end officers, too, that came on. And we did Sunset Parade, which was in Dublin, Ireland, which was in 96. And then we had Fleet Week, which was awesome, too. And that was right in front of, I have pictures of it in my photo album, but in front of World Trade Center and Statue of Liberty as the ships were coming through up the Hudson River and everything.
Wow.
It was pretty cool. You know what I mean? So like I said in the beginning, I thought that was the pinnacle of my career, at the young age. And then when this came about and stood and fought for it and beat it, then I realized that my whole career was a pinnacle for me, because your oath has so much meaning. It's not just, I mean, yeah, you could say I did my time and everything, and these are, the awards and stuff like that. But when your oath is so much, you know what I mean? When you put your hand up and you raise it, and when I even have seen Arlington National Cemetery, or when I go visit my father, at a veteran cemetery, all those headstones, they took the same oath, and they fought for our freedoms that we have today, and they never laid down. And sure as hell, I wasn't going to either, especially knowing that my father and God God first, but my father were looking down on me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I just thought about that and my family name and what needed to be done. And that was it. It has to do a lot with our freedoms, and this is our country. We got to stand up and fight for it. Not be bullied. So
100%. Very well said. And with that being said, listeners, let this be motivation for you. These men are leading by example. I feel motivated and fueled up from their leadership, and I'm going to do my darndest to do my part. And I hope and pray that you take that same course of action. Support our affiliations. Check out Black Eagle Apparel. Get your 22 a day a shirt reflecting the horrific, I believe, underreporting of 22 veterans taking their lives each and every day. We must rule out this corruption. I mean, right here we have pulled up that 66 billion went towards illegal immigrants over this last year, when only 3 billion went to our homeless veterans. We must fix this. This is an issue. And we have the ability and the power to do so through unifying. So let's see through all the BS and do just that. And clearly there's other affiliations that, like Patriot Mobile, stop funding our freaking enemy and the deep state. Patriot Mobile's also on the front lines fighting on behalf of our veterans. Use a link below. Information isn't going to hurt you. You'll get a security blanket and some privacy through having them as your provider. And using the promo code Unmuzzled, they will waive all your fees. Thank you so much for joining us today. Till next time, God bless.
Thanks, James.